Okay, I'm super excited to have Hugo Gomez, bilingualmarketing.com. He has a very unique, this is the first time I've ever had somebody who has noticed a need for this. Now, I've worked with many, many countries, so there's a different way that people purchase. And if you followed me long enough, you'll understand that I've said many times, how do you purchase? What do you enjoy when you're buying will help you determine your selling process. But if you're already to a point where you're pretty solid about what you understand about your selling process and you're looking to expand your niche into different cultures, into different communities, you want to maybe target a Hispanic community, for example. Hugo is your man to help you with that. And he was mentioning in our talk before we even got started with this interview about their behaviors. And I think that would be a great place to get started because you do need to pay attention to the behaviors of your clients, and this is specifically Hispanic buyers in America. And you said a few really interesting things about them before we even hopped on here. They have a certain buying behavior where they use a lot of tech.
Yeah. So the US Hispanic market is over indexes on mobile usage than the general market. They over index on streaming video than the general
Mhm.
market. And they also trust what they read on social media more than the general market.
Okay, so I have a background in teaching
Mhm.
with literacy specifically, but I've also dealt with English as a second language. Why, I'm going to let you answer this. Why video and word versus, speaking back and forth to somebody and that's like, why specifically text and video, do you think?
Yeah, I think it has to do with um, so it's a socioeconomic lever. So, for instance,
Okay.
if you come into the United States, especially as an immigrant, um, it is very unlikely. The odds are stacked against you to have, let's call it a white collar job, meaning having a
Mhm.
job in an office with a desktop computer, a laptop. Unless you came in specifically for that reason, it's not likely that it's more likely that
Now,
you're
why is that? Why is that though?
just in general, you have language as a barrier. You're an
Mhm.
ESL, English as a second language.
Right, right.
Probably harder to hire as a result of being ESL, unless you bring something super unique to the market.
Or you passed a test or some kind of thing. I know there's a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah, totally. So,
Yeah.
and on top of that, there's documentation status, right? Some folks come in with a
Mhm.
visa. Millions of people come to the United States with a visa, and then they tend to overstay,
Mhm.
or they come in through the border undocumented. So, generally speaking, they're going after blue collar jobs, working, very difficult labor.
Yep.
And so, as a result of not being in that office context, the laptops, the computers, the desktop machines, you're probably not connected to the internet in that fashion, but you're definitely connected to the internet through your phone.
Then which makes it easier to engage with it because it's also translating with video. You can translate easier. Social media translates the text for you and things like that. So there's not something misunderstood by this particular client who perhaps English is not their best language, but they're still going to be able to understand what they're buying into and they can still communicate with you. So I know that I had a friend. Well, he's still a friend of mine. I have a friend who's from Colombia and
Mhm.
he moved here just to give some people just a story to connect to about the drive that's behind these people. I mean, these are people coming to our country for not just the Hispanics, but I mean, they are our next door neighbors. So we're going to have a lot more Hispanics coming into our country. And they're coming here because there's opportunity. And you just said it's very unlikely they're going to get a white collar job, but yet they're working their ass off doing labor that is just hot, sweaty work and they want more just like we do, and that's why we're doing the thing. And the online space I think is a perfect opportunity for that. And my friend was somebody who came from Colombia as a teenager back in the day before internet even started, and he was one of those unique people who came into the country and he went and took some classes to learn English. But instead of talking to his buddies that also spoke Spanish, he went over and talked to the Chinese people, the Russians, the Germans, all those people because they had to speak English together. You're not going to have that kind of opportunity as much now, I don't think. I mean, they're kind of thrown into the U.S. to learn the language, but there he had a safe space. So I think this is an opportunity for businesses to create that, that security to say, hey, I'm here. I'm here to help you succeed and
Totally.
bypass all the gatekeepers.
That's half the battle. It's not just translating the work, which it's effective,
Right.
but it's not
It's
the
a
most.
way to get your communication across to them and be aware that they do have the means to understand you. They do
It's a
already
start. It's
have
a great
that.
starting point, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of Hispanic digital marketers out there that really knock on businesses that have Google Translate, and it's a fun thing to talk about. It's a fun thing to like poke fun at. But the way I see it is like at least they're making an effort,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yeah,
a
at least they're
great
trying to
first step.
understand. That's a huge indicator somebody's interested in your services if they're gonna sit there and try to understand what you're saying.
Totally. And so
Yeah.
I think the next level too of connecting to the Hispanic market is not just having translated assets, but having
Mhm.
a bilingual staff. And then level
Okay.
three is like being involved in the community, meaning creating Facebook Live content or being actually in real life events where you're presenting your brand, but with Spanish speakers. So then the highest level is when the community actually refers to you as the sole authority in let's call it dental or
What
legal
yeah.
or whatever vertical you pick. You've won once you've made yourself the go-to authority, whether it's local or statewide or even national. So I think there's many levels to it, but translation is definitely stage one. If you're
Yes.
not doing that right
That's the
now,
door. I mean,
it's a
that's the
story. Yeah.
opening. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the way to introduce yourself. You gotta understand what hell, you said my name correctly when we met, and I'm English.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just as simple as that. The name is very important, you
Yeah,
know?
it is.
But it's also, what am I buying? What do you do? I want to know more. And you have clients that aren't near as, or people that are watching your services that are not near as aggressive. They're going to sit back in the background and just engage and absorb what you're putting out there. So be you. Yes, we have these translators that helps them, but hey, they're not stupid
Yeah.
either. They're not stupid. They're highly motivated. They're putting in the work out there. And the thing is there's a reason why people who can translate for the Hispanic community get money, a lot of money, to come in there and help doctors communicate with Hispanic patients. So why not have a company here in the US with a very large Hispanic community support that as well? If you're going to be a coach and you want to connect with somebody like that, then you have to make those accommodations for that person so that they can learn.
Yeah. You speak to a big reality that I think a lot of business owners um, are either aren't aware of or don't know or don't know
They
what to
may
do with the
not know
information.
how. They may be
Yeah.
timid, a little bit intimidated by how am I going to communicate? I
Right.
have a hard enough time getting clients that can speak English
Right.
to do what I'm asking them to do. And those are things, I mean, like I said, I told you that I have a background in instruction. I used to be a teacher. So that means that I've talked with people that have English as a second language, and they
Hmm.
were fluent, very fluent,
Right.
but they can't be perfectly fluent, but they were very fluent. And some of them were not quite as fluent, but they can still communicate with you. And if you use your hands, you will find a way to communicate with one another. If you really
Right.
want to work with somebody of a Hispanic nature, Chinese nature, whatever, whoever's, if they don't speak your same language, you will find a way to communicate with them. If they can still be your ideal client, English is not the necessity.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so it's 20% of the market. It's one
Yeah.
out of five people in the United States. And it's not a monolith. It takes a lot of work to engage with this market. I think it's actually a little bit more, it's a little bit more difficult to engage with the Hispanic market because it requires more work. It requires more assets. It requires more research.
Okay,
And then,
so assets and research. What are those things that you're talking about from your perspective? What does somebody need in place?
yeah, so I think on the research side, it's just defaulting to the US Census data.
Mhm.
There's county data, there's statewide data, there's
Mhm.
national data on the demographic changes within the United States. It's really important to understand, at least at the city level, what the immigrant makeup is
Right.
in your local markets. I think that's so important if you're looking to find new markets. So
Hmm.
whether or not you have like a local grocery chain, or whether you have a legal office or a dental practice or a chiro practice, you want to at least understand what the market cap is, what the
Hmm.
addressable market size is. So, for instance, in the United States as a whole, it's 20% of the market. In other parts of the US, Florida, it's more like 30% of the market. In
Oh, yeah.
Los
What about
Angeles,
Tennessee? Do you know?
I could actually look that up for you right now. So the Hispanic market,
Because everybody, California, of course,
of
Texas, of
course.
course, New Mexico, of course,
Yeah,
Florida,
so
of course. But let's go up a little north.
yeah, so it looks like it's 500,000. It's 480.
The
So yeah, it's 500,000. So that's about
reason why I said that in Tennessee, I used to live in Tennessee,
mhm,
and Tennessee is a very rural state. It has 3 big cities in it.
totally.
But in a tiny little town, you can look it up if you want to while I'm talking.
Mhm,
But there's a tiny little town named Monterey, Tennessee, and it
mhm.
is I'm thinking very much Hispanic. I mean, it's been turned into a Hispanic community because drive from there to Cookeville, which is the next bigger city, and then there's Knoxville that's real close by, which is a huge city. So it's easy to commute to either one, and a lot of them do own restaurants, things like that. But yes,
Yeah.
but there's also some of them that do work in these different situations and stuff like that. So they live in these smaller towns because it's cheaper to buy houses there,
Yeah.
you know, and then they commute to where they need to work. So if you're thinking that you're living in a state that doesn't have a lot of Hispanic people, why should you care? Check again.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, so the fastest growing Hispanic populations are in states
Hmm.
that are normally not associated with high Hispanic populations. So, like the Dakotas, Kentucky, the Carolinas have seen substantial percentage growth in the last
Hmm.
decade, because yeah, it's much more cost effective to live there than to live in
And how
Miami.
smart is that?
So smart.
I mean, they learned this country.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
like, you know what? Well, we need to leave Florida. Let's go to Tennessee.
Word gets around.
I know.
Word gets around.
There's some opportunity up there. I mean, it can get saturated in these states where they first come in. I mean, let's face it, that's going to be the natural space that they're going to enter
Yeah,
is through New Mexico, Texas, California, and Florida. Even New York, if you're talking about somebody from, Spain, Um, but the thing is you have to think about they've been sitting in their country dreaming about coming to America and thinking about what they're going to do. They're very strategic.
right.
People who want to move to another country that don't speak the same language, they have to be. They have
Yeah.
to plan. I mean, what kind of, do you want a client that just walks up and goes, "Hey, I want to do this thing," or you want a client that walks up and says, "Hey, I've been studying this and this is what I've found out. Can you help me with it?"
So true. So true. Yeah, I mean, we hear this a lot from all verticals, that the clients yield the clients that we help generate for businesses, from our Hispanic marketing, are generally higher lifetime value clients. They have a higher likelihood for referrals because they're,
Yeah,
Hispanic or
they've
more
got a
community
huge
oriented.
community that they know of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we always tell business owners, you earn a client in the Hispanic community. You've really earned the trust of, if you do your job right, if you do them well, you've earned the trust of their cousins, their sisters, their brothers, their parents. And I really do think that that's why, especially in like medical and legal verticals, the referrals are quite high when there is a
Those make
trusted
sense
practitioner.
though.
Yeah,
Really, those make sense as the first ones to be the logical, "Oh, we need to have, somebody here who can translate for us," right?
yeah,
Because early on, it was like, "Oh my gosh, we got all these people coming from another country, and we don't have anybody that can speak to them." And suddenly
correct.
there's a need for a translator, and they get paid big dollars to come walking into that hospital and translate because it's an emergency situation.
Totally.
Those are two situations. If you're going to see a lawyer or if you're going to see the hospital, you're in dire need of something.
Right. But we see this across the board, even with like the non-urgent needs, or even like luxuries like travel,
Mhm.
or in certain types of
That makes
insurance.
so much
Yeah, it's like
sense.
you just want to establish yourself as the only viable option in the community, because in many different parts of Latin America, there aren't really, especially in legal. I'm going to speak more towards legal and
Uh-huh.
medical because that's where we get a lot of our clients.
That
Generally
makes sense.
speaking,
Yeah.
there aren't a lot of specialty uh, attorneys or specialty medical practitioners, and so that's baked into the culture that there's like a de facto legal person, a de facto medical person. And so when immigrants come to the United States, they often come with that mindset, unless they're told, otherwise, that there are just trusted kind of pillars of the community. And as they stay here longer, then they learn that there's many facets of doctors, many facets of attorneys, and so they get conditioned to that. But ultimately, you want to present yourself in that same fashion, that you are the kind of the pillar of the community for that particular area of expertise. And so it's really awesome to see businesses grow very quickly when they make an honest effort to be a part of the community and to advertise to the community. We see a lot of businesses that want to take shortcuts. They want to have
Mhm.
one Spanish page, maybe one social media post per month, maybe an email every
Well,
quarter. It's like you got to
they're
go all in.
already drowning in all the do too. I mean, they're already drowning in that. They're posting so much, they're running from hither and yon, and that's where in my services I'm like, well, let's just find out what's more efficient and where you should focus to generate more revenue, hone that, get good at it. Now
Right,
let's see how we can build on it. And I
right.
think that if somebody, like I said earlier when we first started this, if you have already figured out your marketing strategy and you know exactly what kind of client you want to work with, and you'd like to open up your market to the Hispanic community, this may be something to consider if you are thinking about, reaching out to someone that perhaps is not an English speaker that lives in the United States.
Yeah, and I don't
You
want I
know,
don't want it to sound too dramatic, but it is an existential decision that you're making if you choose not to advertise to the Hispanic community, because in just a couple decades, it will be 40 to 50% of the United States will be Hispanic. So I
I
often tell
think
this
do
to
you think
legacy
also they
business.
understand that English is the voice of business, is the language of business?
I think, yeah, so absolutely, which is why I mentioned earlier that the Hispanic community isn't monolithic. They're not just Spanish
Right. Right,
only.
right, right.
Like, I'm Hispanic, I speak English and Spanish.
Now,
And
were you born in America? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but were you
no,
born in America?
I was born in Ecuador, but I came to the United States at such a young age that I consider myself an American. I'm an American citizen,
How old were you?
like 8 months.
Oh
So,
gosh.
yeah, so,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, you
although
grew up with 2 languages.
yeah, absolutely. I grew up learning English first and then learning
Mhm.
Spanish as a result of being
In the
related to
community.
Spanish
Yeah,
speakers
your
in the
culture.
community,
Yeah.
yeah. And so the reality is, though, that there are many different layers of Hispanic consumers. There are,
Mhm.
let's just call it, folks that have been here, whose families have been here for more than 5 generations. There are folks
Mhm.
that just got to the United
Just
States in
got
the
here.
last
Yeah.
week. There are folks that speak English and Spanish, or one or the other. There are folks that have different income levels when they come to the United States. There are folks that come in with different privileges depending on what country they came from and their diplomatic relation with the United States,
Right.
what the immigration policy is. Then there's visa, the how long you have your visa for, like the duration of your visa. There's so many like the language, that like the dialect that you speak, the
Mhm.
values that you have coming from what country you came from. Some Latin American countries are super conservative. Some are just fairly conservative. It's really
Right, right,
rare.
right.
It's really rare to find super liberal
It
Latin
is.
American countries.
It really
So
is.
there's so many facets, but that's why I always tell business owners, like, let's start with what your neighborhood looks like. What does the zip
Mhm.
code look like? What does the
Mhm.
county look like? And then let's work backwards. If we were to
Yeah,
get
because that's a little easier because they understand the culture there. If they've
total,
been living there, they understand the culture there, so they'll have an easier time connecting with you because you're local. They'll
yeah,
understand it.
exactly.
And I don't wanna make it sound like that they're handicapped or something. They're not. And I see what you're saying by the layers there. I think what I'm listening to you speak about it, and what I see is this is what we do as business owners. It's touching. When you touch someone, like today I'm talking to Hugo. This
Mhm.
relationship starts out with, I've got a guest speaker here, but his words could reach somebody else that is considering the situation, or even a Hispanic person who was like, oh wow, I didn't even realize I could contact an English speaker for support.
Yeah.
Right? It opens up our community to work together versus going, you're Spanish, I'm English, you're this, you're that, you're
Yeah.
this. We're
Totally.
just a group of business people and people who that want to support each other to succeed, to make it, because that's what this freaking country is about.
Yeah.
So my question is for you, because I never really thought about this, because I figured, anybody would come to me regardless. What is maybe other business owners are thinking the same way. It's not like we're going, no, no Hispanics. We're not going to talk to anybody that doesn't speak English.
Mm. Yeah.
So what is it that if somebody wants to open up their market to more than just English speakers and
Yeah.
wants to be open to this melting pot that
Mhm.
we have here in the United States, besides thinking, going into overthought and going, well, now I got to speak Spanish and Chinese and everything else. What's a thing? What's something that they can do that says our doors are open to this community?
Yeah. I think that there's two their requirements to work with us at least. The first is you need to have the ability to answer a call in Spanish. So like the
Hola.
first yeah, exactly. So but ideally
No, I'm
bilingual
teasing.
staff or
Mhm.
bilingual virtual staff, so easy to staff virtually now. Especially in
Mhm.
Latin America, you can get really cost-effective solutions answering your
Oh,
phones.
so cost effective.
So
Oh yeah.
easy. And then the second is you need to be able to service someone who speaks Spanish. But here's the thing, that is like a scenario where someone only speaks Spanish and engages with your business. That rarely happens. What we find
Mhm.
is that
Mhm.
if you advertise in Spanish and that potential client or consumer calls your office, speaks to your bilingual virtual staff in Spanish, and then a meeting is set up in person or even virtually, that Spanish speaker who only speaks Spanish will more than likely bring someone with them who speaks English.
Right, right, because
It
they already
happens
know the
almost every
deal.
time.
They know the deal. Yeah, they know the
They
deal.
understand that like it's really
Yeah.
rare unless that business owner or the person engaging with the client has explicitly said I speak Spanish. Like most Hispanics, especially immigrants, recognize that they're probably going to speak to an agent that is a representative of the business or a representative of the boss, right?
Right,
And
right, right. The
so
gatekeeper, so to
the
speak.
gate
Yeah.
yeah, and so I think that is a really interesting phenomenon that we've found, that no matter how Spanish friendly we make the whole funnel, it's more than likely if someone is Spanish dominant, meaning they only speak Spanish, they're more than likely going to bring a neighbor or a loved one who speaks English with them to the meeting. Just as sort
And
of like
and you said that's kind of like a rarity anyway in this kind of scenario. Most of them are going to know at least enough to be able to communicate with you with broken English anyway.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they'll still understand what you're saying. You might have to slow down a little bit or use pictures, but they're still going to understand what you're saying. It might be something like a disconnect with a word that they just don't hear very
sure,
often,
yeah.
which is why I always tell people don't use words like lead generation, ROI, and CRM. The words of your profession. It's
Yeah,
like a doctor doesn't walk up to every patient, regardless of whether they can speak English or not, and tell you some kind of crazy medical term for your arm is asleep.
right. So true. So
you know?
true.
So just speak. It's not called dumbing it down. It's just called talking in layman's terms, talking in the
Talking like a
people's
human.
language. Just talk to them like a friend,
Talk to them like a human,
like
It's
you would
like
talk to anybody else. And just have that opportunity open for those people when they do come knocking on your door. And if you're interested in doing that, you can go to bilingual.com. The information is in the show notes. Hugo will be happy to help you out and show you how you can connect if you want to open up to a more diverse group of people and open your doors up to someone who doesn't speak English and speaks Spanish instead. Because I think that, if you really, really, really want to help people and you really, really, really want the beauty of your solution to their problem to get the word out, you need to open up to people that are willing to work with you. And it sounds like to me, this community is hardworking. They're planners. They bring their own resources with them so they can work with you. I mean, my goodness,
Totally.
so they're prepared to work with people when they come walking in that door. So if you want to learn more, Hugo's your man, Hugo E. Gomez. And once again, Hugo, what's the name of your company so they can hear it from you?
Sure. Bilingualmarketing.com. And you can find all our information, all our companies there, and our email if you want to chat about opportunities with your other clients. We have a lot of consulting partners that refer us a great deal of work. We love being venture partners with other consultants. So we believe that we have a lot to offer for anyone that's already doing great work for their clients.
Okay, thank you so much, Hugo. This is really amazing. May have you on again. I do have a round table with business coaches, which you may be, that we're a bunch of crazy women. You might be the voice of reason.
That's funny.
So be watching out for the Business Consultants Roundtable. And of course, check out the show notes to learn how to connect. Thank you so much, Hugo. And chat next time in the podcast, everybody. Check out new episodes and be sure to subscribe.
Thanks so much.